The sky was turning dark as 12-year-old Andrew hurried through the fancy part of town. He didn't usually walk this way, but today he was trying to beat the rain. Big drops had already started to fall, and he pulled his foot up, picking up his pace. Andrew lived with his mom in a small apartment across town. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough most days. His mom always told him, "We might not be rich with money, but we're rich with love." Since his dad died 3 years ago, she'd been working 2 jobs, one at the hospital cleaning rooms and another at the diner on weekends. Andrew tried his best to help out by keeping his grades up and staying out of trouble. As he jogged past the tall glass buildings where all the business people worked, something caught his eye. There, under a bench near the bus stop, was a black leather wallet. Andrew stopped and looked around. The street was nearly empty. A few people with umbrellas hurried by, but no one was searching for anything. He picked up the wallet. It felt heavy and expensive, the kind he'd seen in store windows but never touched. For a moment, he just stood there, rain starting to soak through his thin jacket, wondering what to do. "Hello," he called out, thinking the owner might be nearby, but nobody answered. Andrew tucked the wallet into his backpack and ducked under the awning of a coffee shop to take a better look. His heart started beating faster when he opened it. Inside was more cash than he'd ever seen in one place, crisp $100 bills neatly stacked together. There were shiny credit cards too, and a driver's license with the name Richard Harrington and a picture of an older white man with gray hair and kind eyes. "Whoa," Andrew whispered to himself, quickly closing the wallet and looking around nervously. Nobody was watching him. The rain was coming down harder now, so Andrew decided to head home. On the bus ride, he couldn't stop thinking about the wallet. That much money could help his mom a lot. Their fridge was almost empty, and last week she'd been crying when she thought he was asleep. He heard her on the phone, asking for more time to pay their electricity bill. But taking the money didn't feel right. His mom always said, "Your character is what you do when nobody's watching." His dad used to say the same thing before he got sick. When Andrew got home, the apartment was empty. His mom wouldn't be back until late. He sat on his bed and took out the wallet again, laying everything out carefully. Besides the money and credit cards, there was a business card for Harrington Investments with an address downtown, the same area where he'd found the wallet. The back of the card had a handwritten note, "If found, please return. Reward offered." There was a phone number too. Andrew picked up his mom's old laptop and searched for Richard Harrington. His eyes grew wide as he scrolled through the results. The man was famous, a billionaire who owned buildings all over the city. One article called him the self-made man with a golden touch. Another showed him cutting a ribbon at a new children's hospital. "He probably has 100 wallets," Andrew muttered to himself. But deep down, he knew that didn't matter. The wallet wasn't his, no matter how rich its owner was. Andrew looked at a photo of his dad on the dresser. "What would you do, Dad?" he asked quietly. He already knew the answer. His dad had always been the most honest person he knew. Once, a cashier had given them too much change, and his dad had walked all the way back to the store to return it, even though they barely had enough money for dinner that week. Andrew put everything back in the wallet carefully. Tomorrow, he decided he would find this Mr. Harrington and return what belonged to him. It was the right thing to do, even if his empty stomach argued otherwise. He put the wallet under his pillow for safekeeping and started on his homework, trying not to think about all that money just inches from his head. The rain tapped against his window, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, like the world was reminding him that sometimes the hardest choices are the most important ones. Andrew barely slept that night. The wallet under his pillow felt like it was burning a hole straight through to his mattress. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those crisp bills and thought about what they could buy. Groceries for a month, new shoes to replace his worn-out ones, maybe even catching up on the rent, so his mom wouldn't look so worried all the time. Around midnight, his mom came home from her late shift. He heard her quiet footsteps in the kitchen, the soft opening and closing of cupboards, and then a heavy sigh. He knew that sigh. It meant the cupboards were still as empty as they had been this morning. Andrew rolled over, his hand touching the wallet. He could just take half, he thought. Mr. Harrington probably wouldn't even notice, with all his billions. But as soon as the thought came, he felt ashamed. That wasn't who he was. That wasn't who his parents had raised him to be. Morning came too soon. Andrew got up before his alarm, careful not to wake his mom who had fallen asleep on the couch, still wearing her work clothes. He left a note saying he was heading to school early for a project and would see her later. But Andrew wasn't going to school, not yet. He had decided to take the wallet to Harrington Investments first. He could still make it to school by second period if he hurried. The bus ride downtown felt longer than usual. Andrew kept his backpack on his lap, one hand always touching the pocket where the wallet was hidden. At one stop, a group of older boys got on, laughing loudly. Andrew recognized one of them from his neighborhood, a kid who was always showing off new sneakers and phones that everyone knew he hadn't bought. For a moment, Andrew wondered what would happen if they knew what he was carrying. But then the bus reached their stop, and they got off without even noticing him. As the tall buildings of downtown came into view, Andrew felt his stomach tighten. What if they didn't believe him? What if they thought he had stolen the wallet? People often looked at him differently because of his skin color, especially in this part of town. The Harrington Investments building was the tallest one on the block, all shiny glass and steel reaching up to touch the clouds. Andrew had never been inside a building like this before. He stood outside for a few minutes, gathering his courage, watching men and women in fancy suits hurry through the revolving doors. Finally, he took a deep breath and walked in. The lobby was huge, with marble floors so shiny he could almost see his reflection. A massive desk sat in the center, where two guards in uniforms watched everyone who came in. Andrew's sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as he approached the desk. One of the guards looked up, surprise crossing his face. "Can I help you, son?" the guard asked, his voice neither friendly nor unfriendly. Andrew swallowed hard. "I found something that belongs to Mr. Harrington," he said, his voice coming out smaller than he intended. "His wallet. I found it yesterday." The second guard looked up now, eyebrows raised. "You found Mr. Harrington's wallet?" Andrew nodded and carefully pulled the wallet from his backpack. "Everything's still in it," he said quickly. "I didn't take anything, I swear." The guards exchanged a look that Andrew couldn't read. Then the first one picked up a phone and spoke quietly into it. "What's your name?" the second guard asked. "Andrew," he replied, shifting from one foot to the other. "Well, Andrew, someone will be down in a minute to talk to you." Andrew stood awkwardly by the desk, acutely aware of how out of place he looked in his worn jeans and faded hoodie. Business people streamed past him, some glancing curiously in his direction. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Andrew was starting to think about just leaving the wallet and running to school when an elevator dinged and a tall woman in a crisp suit stepped out. She had a kind face and smiled when she saw him. "You must be Andrew," she said, walking over. "I'm Mr. Harrington's assistant. He'd like to meet you, if that's okay." Andrew's heart skipped a beat. "Meet me? Why?" The woman smiled again. "Not many people would return a wallet with that much cash in it. He wants to thank you personally." Before Andrew could process what was happening, he was being led toward the elevator, about to meet one of the richest men in the city. The elevator was made of glass, and as it climbed higher and higher, Andrew could see the whole city spreading out below him. His neighborhood was somewhere in the distance, looking small and far away. His stomach did a little flip as the elevator passed the 30th floor and kept going. "First time in a building this tall?" the assistant asked kindly. Andrew nodded, not trusting his voice. His palms were sweaty, and he wiped them against his jeans. "Mr. Harrington was very relieved when we told him you found his wallet," she said. "He's been turning the city upside down looking for it." The elevator finally stopped on the top floor, and the doors slid open silently. Andrew followed the assistant down a hallway with thick carpet that felt like walking on clouds. The walls were lined with paintings that probably cost more than his mom made in a year. They stopped at a large wooden door, and the assistant knocked before opening it. "Mr. Harrington, this is Andrew, the young man who found your wallet." Andrew stepped into the biggest office he had ever seen. Windows stretched from floor to ceiling, showing views of the entire city. A large desk stood at one end, and behind it, rising from a leather chair, was the man from the driver's license photo. Richard Harrington was tall with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore an expensive suit, but had his sleeves rolled up like he had been working hard. He smiled when he saw Andrew and walked around the desk with his hand outstretched. "Andrew, I can't thank you enough, he said, shaking Andrew's hand firmly. Please have a seat. Andrew sank into a chair that was probably worth more than everything in his apartment combined. He carefully pulled the wallet from his backpack and held it out. I found it yesterday, sir, under a bench near your building. Everything's still there. Mr. Harrington took the wallet and checked inside, nodding with relief. Indeed it is. Do you know how much money is in here, son? Andrew looked down at his sneakers. Yes, sir, I counted it. $2,300. And you didn't take any of it? Not even a single dollar. Mr. Harrington was watching him carefully. No, sir, it wasn't mine to take. Mr. Harrington sat on the edge of his desk, studying Andrew with interest. That's quite impressive. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Tell me about yourself, Andrew. Where do you go to school? For the next few minutes, Andrew found himself telling this billionaire about his life, about school, about his mom working 2 jobs, about how he liked computers and math, but his school didn't have enough equipment for everyone to use. And your father? Mr. Harrington asked gently. He died 3 years ago. Cancer. Andrew's voice got quieter. He was the best man I knew. Mr. Harrington nodded slowly. He must have been, to have raised such an honest son. He walked back around his desk and sat down, pressing a button on his phone. Lisa, could you bring in the envelope we discussed? While they waited, Mr. Harrington asked Andrew about his favorite subjects and what he wanted to do when he grew up. I want to make computers and apps, Andrew said, his eyes lighting up despite his nervousness. I've been teaching myself coding with free videos at the library, but it's hard without having my own computer to practice on. The assistant returned with a sealed envelope and handed it to Mr. Harrington, who passed it across the desk to Andrew. This is a small token of my appreciation, he said. Please accept it. Andrew hesitated before taking the envelope. It felt heavy in his hands. You should get to school now, Mr. Harrington said, standing up. But I'd like to continue our conversation. Would it be possible for you and your mother to join me for lunch this Saturday? Andrew's mouth fell open. Lunch? With you? Mr. Harrington smiled. Yes, I have a proposition I'd like to discuss with both of you. Something that might help with your interest in computers. As the assistant led him back to the elevator, Andrew felt like he was floating. He clutched the envelope, wondering what was inside and what Saturday might bring. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for sure. His dad would have been proud of the choice he made. Andrew didn't open the envelope until he was safely on the bus heading to school. His hands trembled as he carefully tore it open. Inside was a thank you note written on fancy paper with the Harrington Investments logo at the top. But what made Andrew gasp was what came with it, 5 crisp $100 bills. $500. It was more money than he'd ever held in his life. The note said simply, "Thank you for your honesty and integrity." The SUV drove them through parts of the city Andrew had never seen before. They passed through neighborhoods with huge houses and perfectly trimmed lawns where people walked fancy dogs and drove expensive cars. His mom sat quietly beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Where are we going?" Andrew finally asked the driver. "The Bayview Club, sir," Thomas replied. "It's Mr. Harrington's favorite lunch spot." Andrew and his mom exchanged nervous glances. They'd heard of the Bayview Club. It was the kind of place where rich people went, where even the cheapest meal probably cost more than their weekly grocery budget. 20 minutes later, the SUV pulled up to a building overlooking the water. A man in a uniform hurried to open their door. "Welcome to the Bayview Club," he said, smiling as they stepped out. Inside, everything gleamed, the floors, the chandeliers, even the buttons on the staff's uniforms. A woman at the front desk looked up as they entered. "You must be the Jenkins family," she said warmly. "Mr. Harrington is waiting for you in the private dining room. Please follow me." As they walked through the main dining area, Andrew noticed other guests glancing at them. He suddenly felt very aware of his too small shirt and his scuffed shoes. His mom must have felt it too, because she straightened her back and lifted her chin, her eyes forward. The woman led them to a door at the back of the restaurant and opened it with a flourish. Inside was a small dining room with a table set for 3. Windows stretched across one wall, showing a breathtaking view of the bay. Mr. Harrington stood as they entered, smiling broadly. He wore casual clothes today, expensive looking, but without a tie or jacket. Mrs. Jenkins, Andra. Thank you so much for coming, he said, stepping forward to shake their hands. Please have a seat. I've taken the liberty of ordering some appetizers to start. Andrew's mom sat stiffly, her smile polite but cautious. Mr. Harrington, this is very generous of you, but I have to ask, why exactly are we here? Mr. Harrington nodded as if he'd expected the question. Straightforward. I appreciate that. He leaned back in his chair. Your son did something extraordinary, Mrs. Jenkins. In a world where most people would have kept the money, or at least some of it, Andrew returned every cent. A server came in with a tray of food, tiny sandwiches, vegetables with dips, and things Andrew couldn't even name. Help yourselves, Mr. Harrington said, and please call me Richard. Andrew's stomach growled, and he carefully took a sandwich, trying to remember the table manners his mom had taught him. As I was saying, Mr. Harrington continued, integrity like Andrew's is rare. It speaks to his character and to how he was raised. He nodded respectfully to Andrew's mom. Thank you, she said, relaxing slightly. But that still doesn't explain why you've brought us here. Mr. Harrington took a sip of water. Fair enough, Mrs. Jenkins. Denise, she corrected him, seeming to decide that if he wanted them to use his first name, he should use hers too. Denise, he smiled. Andrew told me he's interested in computers and coding. He also mentioned that his school doesn't have adequate resources. Andrew nodded, his mouth full of the most delicious sandwich he'd ever tasted. I started my company from nothing, Mr. Harrington said. My parents had little money, but someone gave me a chance when I was young. A scholarship to a good school. It changed my life. He looked directly at Andra. I'd like to do the same for you. The room went quiet. Andrew's mom put down the glass she'd been holding. What exactly are you offering? She asked, her voice careful. A full scholarship to Westridge Academy. It's a private school with one of the best computer science programs in the state. Andrew would have access to advanced courses, the latest technology, and teachers who could nurture his talents. Andrew nearly choked on his sandwich. Westridge Academy. That was the fancy school where all the rich kids went, with its own swimming pool and computer lab. That's very generous, his mom said slowly. But Westridge is across town. The commute would be. Transportation would be included, Mr. Harrington cut in, and any supplies, uniforms, everything he would need. Andrew could barely breathe. This couldn't be real. There's more, Mr. Harrington continued. If Andrew maintains good grades, I'd like to establish a college fund for him as well. At this, Andrew's mom put a hand over her mouth. For a terrible moment, Andrew thought she might cry. Why? She finally asked. Why would you do all this for us? For returning a wallet? Mr. Harrington's face grew serious. Because talent and character should be rewarded, Denise. Your son has both. The money I lost can be replaced. But the integrity Andrew showed, that's priceless. He looked out the window for a moment. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What good is it if I can't use it to make a difference? Andrew found his voice at last. I wouldn't let you down, sir. I promise. Mr. Harrington smiled at him. I know you won't. He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. All the details are in here. Take your time, discuss it, and let me know what you decide. As their main course arrived, plates of food fancier than anything Andrew had ever seen, he realized that this lunch wasn't just about eating at a nice restaurant or getting a reward. It was about his future, and it had just cracked wide open with possibilities he never dared to dream about. 2 months later, Andrew stood in front of Westridge Academy, his new backpack feeling stiff and heavy on his shoulders. The building looked like something from a movie, all brick and ivy with huge windows and a sprawling green lawn. Students streamed past him, laughing and talking, most of them not even glancing his way. You've got this, his mom said beside him, squeezing his hand. She had taken the morning off to see him to his first day, even though it meant she'd have to work late tonight. After that lunch with Mr. Harrington, everything had happened so fast. There were forms to fill out, placement tests to take, uniforms to be fitted. Andrew had gotten his own laptop, brand new and faster than any computer he'd ever touched, and a phone so he could call his mom whenever he needed to. What if they don't like me? Andrew whispered, watching a group of boys who all seemed to know each other already. Then that's their loss, his mom said firmly. Remember what your dad used to say? Andrew nodded. You belong wherever your feet are standing. He took a deep breath. Okay, I'm ready. The first few weeks at Westridge were harder than Andrew had expected. The classes moved faster than at his old school, and the other kids seemed to know things he'd never even heard of. Some of them were nice enough, but others whispered when he walked by. One boy, Carter, whose dad was some big-shot lawyer, kept accidentally bumping into him in the hallway. But the computer lab, that was where Andrew felt at home. The first time he walked in and saw rows of the newest computers, tablets for coding practice, and even a 3D printer, he almost couldn't believe his eyes. The computer science teacher, Mr. Lee, noticed Andrew's interest right away. "You've got a knack for this," he said after Andrew finished a coding assignment in half the time of his classmates. Ever thought about joining the robotics team? Andrew hadn't, but soon he was staying after school 3 days a week, learning how to build and program robots with a small group of other students. To his surprise, he was good at it, really good. His fingers seemed to know what to do even before his brain figured it out. One afternoon, about 4 months into the school year, Mr. Harrington showed up at robotics practice. Andrew hadn't seen him since that day at the Bayview Club, though he'd received a few encouraging notes with his monthly scholarship check. "I hear you're making quite an impression," Mr. Harrington said, watching as Andrew demonstrated the robot he'd been working on, a small machine that could sort colored blocks. "The school is amazing," Andrew told him. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Mr. Harrington smiled. "You're the one making the most of it. That's the hard part." As they walked toward the front of the school where Thomas was waiting with the car to take Andrew home, Mr. Harrington asked, "How are things going besides academics? Making friends?" Andrew hesitated. "Some of the kids are okay. Others, not so much." Mr. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "I expected as much. New environments are always challenging, especially when you're breaking barriers." Breaking barriers. "Andrew, you're the first scholarship student from your neighborhood that Westridge has ever accepted. That matters. What you're doing here isn't just about you, it's about who comes after you." Andrew had never thought about it that way before. "I have a new project I'd like your help with," Mr. Harrington continued. "I'm setting up a weekend coding program at the community center near your old neighborhood. We'll provide computers, instructors, everything kids need to learn. Would you be interested in helping teach the younger students?" Andrew's eyes widened. "Me? Teach? Why not? You're learning fast. Sometimes the best teachers are those who remember what it's like to be beginners themselves." By the time Thomas dropped him off at home that evening, Andrew's mind was buzzing with ideas. He burst through the door, eager to tell his mom everything. She was sitting at the kitchen table, looking tired after her double shift, but smiling as he came in. Their apartment was the same, but somehow it felt different now, like a place they were moving forward from, not stuck in. "Guess what?" Andrew began, dropping his backpack on a chair. "Mr. Harrington came to school today, and he wants me to help teach coding to kids in our old neighborhood." His mom's smile grew wider. "Look at you, not even finished with your first year and already becoming a teacher." Andrew grinned. "And there's this robotics competition next month. Mr. Lee thinks our team has a chance to win." As he talked excitedly about his day, Andrew realized something had changed in him. The fear he'd felt on his first day was gone. In its place was something new, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, he did belong at Westridge. Not because someone had given him a scholarship, but because he had earned his place there. That night before bed, Andrew looked at the photo of his dad on his nightstand. "I wish you could see this, Dad," he whispered. "I think you'd be proud." In the quiet of his room, he could almost hear his father's voice. "I already am." 6 years passed like the turning pages of a book. Andrew stood on the university stage in his graduation cap and gown, scanning the crowd until he found the faces he was looking for. His mom was in the front row, dressed in a new blue suit and dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Beside her sat Mr. Harrington, now with more silver in his hair, but the same proud smile on his face. Andrew could hardly believe he was here, graduating with honors from one of the top computer science programs in the country. The path hadn't always been smooth. There were late nights of studying until his eyes burned, moments of doubt when the work seemed too hard, times when he wondered if he truly belonged. But he had made it. As he accepted his diploma, he thought about the wallet that had changed everything. One small moment, one decision to do the right thing, and his whole life had shifted onto a different track. After the ceremony, his mom hugged him tight. "Your father would be bursting with pride right now," she whispered. She looked different these days, less tired, more hopeful. With Andrew's scholarship covering his education and Mr. Harrington offering her a job at one of his company's offices, she finally had just one job instead of two. Their new apartment had windows that let in plenty of light, and she had even started taking evening classes to finish her own degree. "I have something to tell you both," Mr. Harrington said as they sat down for the celebration lunch he had arranged. "I've been thinking about this for some time." Andrew and his mom exchanged curious glances. "Andrew, when you found my wallet 6 years ago, you didn't just return my money and credit cards. You reminded me of something important, that character and integrity matter more than wealth or status." Mr. Harrington pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "I'd like to announce the creation of the Jenkins Harrington Foundation. It's a non-profit organization that will provide technology education and scholarships to young people from underserved communities." Andrew's mom gasped softly. "And I'd like you, Andrew, to run it," Mr. Harrington continued. "Your starting salary is outlined on page 3. Andrew opened the folder with shaking hands. The number he saw made his eyes widen. "This is, I don't know what to say." "Said yes," Mr. Harrington smiled. "You know better than anyone what a difference opportunity can make. Who better to lead this foundation than someone who has lived it?" That summer, they converted an old building in Andrew's former neighborhood into the foundation's first learning center. They filled it with computers, hired teachers, and opened the doors to any kid who wanted to learn. On the first day, 20 children showed up. By the end of the month, there were over 100. Andrew walked through the busy classrooms, watching kids who reminded him of himself just a few years ago, their faces lighting up as they created their first lines of code or built their first simple websites. One boy in particular caught his attention, a quiet 10-year-old named Louis who always stayed late, soaking up everything Andrew taught him. "You're really good at this," Andrew told him one afternoon. "Reminds me of myself when I was your age." Louis looked up, his eyes serious. "My mom says I shouldn't get my hopes up about college. She says it's not for people like us." Andrew sat down next to him. "Can I tell you a story, Louis? It's about a wallet I found when I was a little older than you." As he told Louis his story, Andrew watched the boy's expression change from doubt to wonder to hope. "So you see," Andrew finished, "sometimes life changes in ways you'd never expect. The important thing is to be ready when opportunity knocks, and to remember to help open the door for others once you've walked through it yourself." By the time Andrew finished his story, other children had gathered around to listen. They peppered him with questions about robots and coding and college, their voices excited and full of possibility. That evening, as Andrew locked up the center, he looked back at the building with its new sign, Jenkins Harrington Foundation, Building Futures Through Technology. Kids from the neighborhood were still hanging around outside, talking excitedly about the apps they wanted to build and the games they wanted to create. Andrew smiled as he walked to his car. What had started with finding a wallet had become something so much bigger. A ripple that would keep spreading outward, changing not just his life, but countless others. And that, he thought, was the greatest reward of all.